Welcome to Leadership Lanes. I'm your host Abhijit, and today we are excited to welcome Michael Forhez. He's a results driven industry leader and visionary in retail and consumer sectors. With deep expertise in consulting, sales, marketing, and digital transformation, Michael has partnered with some of the world's leading brands to drive innovation. A recognized thought leader, he frequently shares his insights on a wide array of subjects, including loyalty marketing, customer relationship management, direct to consumer strategies, the utilization of advanced technologies, and the future of consumer markets. There might be a few questions over there, Michael, just FYI. As a founding co-chair of CGTRIS Executive Council, charter member of the CGTRIS League of Leaders, and former member of the Consumer Goods Forum, Michael is deeply committed to mentoring and fostering growth in others. We are thrilled to have him with us to discuss data-driven strategies shaping in retail consumer goods sector today. Welcome to the episode, Michael.
Thanks so much, Abhijit. I've been looking forward to this conversation, and I'm glad to be here with you today.
So let's dive in, right? You've had quite a fascinating journey in consumer markets. Could you start by sharing a bit about your background, how you came to focus on data-driven approaches in retail and consumer goods specifically?
Yeah, well, it's a journey of a career, we often say, and we start from the past, but we don't know where we're going to end up until we get there. And such is the case with my journey. At the time I began, I was the youngest district manager ever hired by Revlon. I think that's still true, by the way. I had a multi-million-dollar territory in the Midwest of the United States. And after 5 years there, I went on to Unilever, stints at Kraft General Foods, an IRI. And then I got into technology, SaaS, and CAS, which is in trade promotion management. I did stints in consulting as well, Capgemini and Tata. So in industry, we often call this a trifecta. Somebody who starts in industry, literally, in my case, consumer packaged goods and affiliated retail, moves into technology and or consulting, and then works its way around. That person might work their way around. So I've been very, very, very fortunate. I've worked, as you've said, for some great companies in the course of my career. Most recently, Oracle, I'm quite proud to say. I've traveled all over the world and met with retailers and consumer goods companies from Asia Pac, from Central America, all across the United States, of course, MIA, and so forth. So I've had a great fortune in being able to meet people with diverse points of view, serving diverse consumers all over the world.
That's quite fascinating, actually. And right, I mean, one particular point from my introduction was also the fact that you're passionate about helping others' growth. And we have known ourselves for quite a few months now, and I can personally vouch for that. To move ahead, right? As you worked across these sectors, was there a particular moment when you realized that the impact of data could have on transforming business outcomes?
Yeah, it goes back quite a ways now, and again, my career spans several decades. But I can tell you that I was at the very early stages of the utilization of data to inform some of the core processes that supported the structure of our industry. Those processes would include category management, trade promotion management, now known as trade promotion optimization, supply chain intelligence, new product introductions, and so forth. And these processes were part of a format known as ECR, or efficient consumer response. And so we began them as a better way to do a better job, if you will, at retail and on behalf of consumers who were shopping those stores. Now, the technology and the data came together simultaneously, and it made it possible for us to, if you will, parse the data more quickly, more efficiently, shift the data from, raw into information into insight into action. Now, these were processes that have been evolving now over many, many years. And we're going to get to this, I assume, in a little bit of our conversation, but the technology that we're working with today far outweighs and outstrips the technology that we were working with then. Notwithstanding, it had huge impact on the industry in as much as the things that we were doing needed to shift in order to accommodate the technology and data availability, which was really under the direction of a very small cadre of people, in some cases, market research departments or brand managers or executive management. Now, in a distributed world, salespeople had access, marketeers had access, category managers, trade promotion managers, and so forth. People across the enterprise and across the span of the industry were now better informed with data that provided what came to be known as one version of the truth.
That's an interesting point you bring, right? And somehow, do you feel that the data democratization is at its peak at this moment?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know what at its peak really means. I mean, we're being stretched and we're stretching. The leading corporations, that is, some of the largest of the Fortune 500 or Fortune 100 in retail consumer goods, have enormous resources under management. But what's really changed is now you put it the democratization of data. It's not just between and within organizations. It's big organizations and medium-sized organizations and small organizations all have now access to data. That data could be as simple as from syndicated research. It could be from frequent shopper programs. It could be from third-party geodemographic and psychographic firms. It could be from consultants who are performing all of this on behalf of smaller companies. And then, of course, now technology has moved into the cloud, so that's made, the availability of data and like technology possible for every size firm at any point in their evolution.
That's interesting. And this is something we have talked often about data silos and the problems it has.
Yeah.
And somehow, with with the technology that we have today, some of those problems seem to be less challenging as they were a few years back.
Mm, mm, mm. Again, I don't know if they're less challenging. What we're seeing now, because of the availability of data, is the uncovering of certain truths that were masked by the lack of such information. Democratization is a good word. The data is now available across the enterprise. Now, what's unique and interesting in this moment is it's not nearly as siloed as it once was. So, if you're in supply chain management, you just concern yourself with the data and the application through algorithms to determine demand and supply performance, right? Days of supply in the distribution center, in the back room of a store, ultimately on the store shelf. And that was confined to that very small group, relatively speaking. But the same thing could be said for marketing and sales folks, right? They were all working within their area and their department. And what's happened now is the data availability through the utilization of various technologies makes it possible for all of us to have a better understanding of cross impact. So if manufacturing turns out to be making too much of something, they can figure out how to modify the line in order to accommodate the demand that the sales signals provide, or consumers are providing through online portals and what have you. My point is this: the data availability makes it possible for us to synchronize action and in order to facilitate the smoothing to accommodate, if you will, demand and supply to consumer need states. And that is revolutionary. Now, having said that, there are circumstances that are completely off the board, right? When a boat gets stuck in the Suez Canal, when we have a global pandemic, when there's a conflict in the part of the world that inhibits supply. All of these things weren't anticipated. And now the ability for organizations to react, their nimbleness for that need is more critical than ever.
That's an interesting point, and sorry to divulge a bit here. And this is a question I typically ask, and I get varied responses. Do you feel the technology advances that have happened today are an after effect of the pandemic, or do you feel that irrespective of the pandemic happening or not, we would have seen these advancements that we are seeing
Yeah,
today?
yeah, that is also a very good question. So there are moments in time that we could call them accelerators. There's even a great book that talks about it with a different adjective, a black swan event. All right, so Taleb talks about this. Black swans are these rare events that when they happen, we don't understand completely their effect, but we come to find out over time just how important they were and how it changed the rules of the game, if you will. So In answer to your question, these technologies were already, on the drawing board, and they, processes and technologies that may have taken 5 to 10 years to become more a part of the organization's development had to accelerate by requirement. So, in a global pandemic, we stopped going to stores by necessity, but we still needed the products, the services that we needed to continue our lives. And so corporations had to adapt to that moment. And some of these technologies made that possible where they might have not been able to do that in the past. Like, for instance, the internet. It's kind of an obvious example, but it gave rise to commerce at the speed of thought, if you will. So if I couldn't go to a store, I could order online. If I couldn't get it at the store's front end, so BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store, it could be delivered direct to my home. And so these accommodations were made and made possible at a speed that I don't think the industry would have seen, except for the effect in this instance of a global pandemic. And then there are other examples that are hastening, if you will, or speeding the adaptation of these technologies to suit a particular moment in time.
That's an interesting take, actually. And moving on to my next point, right? Data analytics has become central to decision making in many industries, right? I mean, from your experience, what are some of the most significant changes that data-driven approaches have brought in retail and CPG?
Well, again, I go back to some of what we've been discussing from the beginning of this conversation. The ability to use data to inform core processes was a big game changer. So, category management was made possible not just by the technology of the era, but the ability to use syndicated research to inform days of supply, consumer takeaway, to come up with the math which determined GMROI, gross margin on return on investment, to optimize a category in order to ensure that the right products at the right price had the right number of facings to accommodate consumer demand. So that's an early stage development. Now, if we move a light year ahead, we have social data that's available. So it's not just syndicated research anymore. Consumers are actually telegraphing, if you will, to major manufacturers and retailers what they want by virtue of who they are in the moment. I'm at a ball game, I'm having a frank, a hot dog, if you will. I'm at a ball game and I'm consuming a cold brew, whatever. And I'm sharing in real time the experience of my life. And all of that data is now commingling with other data to inform for manufacturers and retailers where consumers are at any given time and place, whether they're at work, whether they're at play, whether they're at home. Likewise, sentiment is being recorded because consumers are sharing it. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm excited, I'm celebrating. And these sentiments inform how brands serve their purpose, which isn't just about making sure there's enough of a raw product on the shelf, but that they actually acknowledge at the moment of truth who that shopper is, what that household looks like, the special event, a birthday, an anniversary, a holiday period, any kind of celebration or need state in real time. And this makes it possible for retailers to tailor their messages, their marketing mix, their product mix, and their pricing structures, all in a way that we wouldn't have been able to do 5, even 10 years ago, right? So we've come a long way since then. And this is what I mean by the fact that the curve accelerates, right? So for every bump in our ability to react to the market reacts in kind, and therefore the speed picks up and the transformation takes hold, and then the next iteration and so forth and so on. So it's never done. We're on a loop, if you will, of change and acceleration. Sometimes that's determined by the big players. Sometimes that's determined by the outlying firms, the outside in, or the disruptive companies that have really made a huge difference just in the last several years alone.
That's interesting, and this brings up a good point, and we have had this discussion previously as well. The importance for retailers to have first party data versus third.
Mm,
So, what is your take on it, especially because of a major factor of third party cookies getting deprecated soon? Uh,
right.
what do you feel is a major challenge for retailers at this moment when it comes to having first party data?
Right. Well, one of the principal issues that the data comes in from, different places. It's in different time series. It's in different formats. It's not always clean. So one of the ways that industry is dealing with this, several fold, we're using data lakes where we just put all the data in one place and then we use technology to sort it out, cleanse it, normalize it, stage it, and then put it in some form of an application or tool that allows it to be shared across or between and among different groups within any enterprise. It's interesting that you should bring up retailers as if that's its own, its own silo, because really manufacturers of finished goods depend on retailers to bring those products to consumers. Likewise, retailers wouldn't exist if it weren't for the fact of manufacturers. We call this trading partner management. And in the best of cases, we call it trading partner relationship management, which is an acknowledgement that one can't live without the other. So really what we're trying to understand then is the sharing in real time of data that retailers have that manufacturers need to serve their purpose. Also, manufacturers, especially where they're going direct to consumer, have insights about consumer behavior that retailers might not possess. And so what you're really looking for is an understanding of what manufacturers and retailers are in the business of. And until very recently, and speaking candidly, it really was in the business of what they thought they were in the business of, which is what? To make lots of things and sell lots of things. But if we're honest with ourselves, and if the industry is authentic in its purpose, its determination isn't by how much they sell necessarily or what profit they make, notwithstanding that's true. Their real purpose is to serve the consumer, the household, the individual, wherever they are, whatever they want, whatever they need, when and how they wish to have it. That's where the industry is starting to mature, in my honest opinion, from mass manufacturing and mass marketing to personalization on a level that wasn't possible except through the utilization of data in near real time and the technology that makes it possible to understand and transmit that data across the enterprise between and among players.
That's quite interesting actually. And a follow-up question to that actually, right? I mean, when it comes to personalization, I believe it's, again, I say it with utmost caution that it is comparatively easier to do it
Hmm.
online, to do it through online channels because it's right on your fingertips, as opposed to doing it in store. Now, where do you see the in-store outlet heading in future?
Hmm. Hmm.
Once the pandemic began, there were a lot of noises saying that okay, in-store is dying, it's slow death, or online will be the way forward. Or do you still see there is like tremendous opportunity for in-store operations when it comes to things like personalization? Do you see the store becoming more maybe digitized is not the correct word, maybe more IoT focused, maybe
Hmm.
more device oriented to cater to the consumers inherently?
So the question really, we were talking about a few minutes ago, the iteration of the utilization of data and technology, and how under certain circumstances, the transformation that takes hold could be accelerated by a prompt. Okay. So again, we had a pandemic and people couldn't go to stores. And when we talk particularly about fast moving consumer goods, consumer packaged goods, the things that sustain us, right? The average grocery store was visited by the standard household 2.3 times a week, right? Sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more, depending on how big that household and the presence of children or cats and dogs, whatever. We overnight realized we couldn't go to stores. We needed things. We needed bread and butter, and we needed, it turns out, toilet paper more than most people thought they needed, but that's a different conversation. We needed to be replenished by the very products that sustain us: household products, food and beverage, beauty care, healthcare, and so forth. And we had no choice but to adapt to a situation that prevented all of us from showing up at a store. And because shopping at that level is habitual, what happened in the course of 18 to 24 months is people got really used to, standards of delivery within hours, if not a day, direct to their home. And they realized a certain convenience in that, and the premium of time that they were advantaged by the fact that they didn't have to get in the car, they didn't have to go into town, they didn't have to park the car, go into the store, stand in a long line, get back in the car, unpack the groceries when they got home. All of that was eliminated. Now, the question is, at what point do these products become commodities, and or at what point do we revisit what was initially the equity in the brand, the promise that was inherent in the brand, something that differentiated this loaf of bread from that, this stick of butter from that, this roll of toilet paper from this, and so forth and so on. And so brands and retailers have had to return, if you will, to an earlier age where brands had an inherent promise. They had equity, which was built over many generations. And, some products we know that we are still in love with, for instance, not because they're better or worse than anything else. We just have an attachment to them. I think what I'm trying to say here is that both brands and retailers are now coming full circle, realizing again that they're not in the business of mass manufacturing, mass distribution. They're in the business of serving need states. Some of those are quite literal. I have to have it. Some of those are, I'd like to have it. Some of those are about inspiration. This would be lovely to have, etc. And I think what you're starting to see now, especially at retail, that the store of the future, the present state, is to create a customer experience that is more than the sum of, I must buy this today, and something about information and inspiration, about a love affair, if you will. And so stores now are doing a better job, in my opinion. It's not about stack it high, watch it fly. It's about, who am I that I can be in the service of you and your household? If you have a nutrition requirement, if you have a special occasion, if you need to know about a bottle of wine, this versus that, to go with that steak or fish. If we're talking about apparel and footwear, what style, what life stage are you in right now that I can serve your purpose, and so forth. So data is making it possible for retailers to tailor that conversation. But there's also something else. There are going to be products, as there are right now, that are being custom made. And you're seeing this in footwear and various apparel, but also we're going to move into nutraceuticals and ultimately other things that manufacturers are going to be at scale able to make products and provide services that are optimized specifically for you as a result of the communication exchange. You opt in and you're telling me more about who you are and what you need. And I begin to also anticipate those needs and provide those products and services as required.
That brings up an interesting question, actually, right? I always feel, and retail is a industry that probably generates the most amount of data when it
Mm.
comes to users, when it comes to vendors, supply chain, etc. How do you feel retailers are dealing with when it comes to maturity and integrity of the customer's data?
Right. There are some interesting data points on this subject. A major consultancy just performed an analysis on data utilization. I have it right here. 50% of organizations in 2024 fall under the data laggards versus 71% in 2020. All right. So you can see that retailers in this instance, or companies that make use of data, are starting to catch up, but it is significantly below what I think we would all like to believe is a higher threshold of utility and utilization. So here it is. I mean, we're getting better at it, certainly better than we once were, but we have a long way to go, which means that the journey is just beginning. And we'll probably get into this in a minute, but there's a big difference between, again, data, information, insight, utility. There's also a difference between those who can interpret the data, we would call them data scientists, and those who can tell a story about what comes from that data, we call them storytellers. And I think what we're starting to come to terms with is the math gives us a part of the answer. Our intuition, our understanding of consumer need states also has to come from the heart. And so what we're trying to do then is commingle what's natural about our understanding of human behavior and what's learned as a result of the data that performs to that purpose. So again, we have a long way to go, which is a great story to tell, and an opportunity, whether you're a large manufacturer or retailer, a mid-size, or even a small company, there's plenty of room to grow plenty of room to learn and to make a difference in this respect.
You bring up a good point about storytelling, actually, right? And this has come up in a lot of our episodes as well. Uh,
Mm.
the importance of storytelling. You have the math, and how do you uplift that math through storytelling? So, as a consultant, right, I believe storytelling is one of the major aspects you might be dealing maybe on a daily basis. So, what is, and I've seen like each guest answer me in a different way. So, when it comes to storytelling, what is your, I would say, mantra, or what is your framework?
Well, there's the qualitative and then there's the quantitative. So the qualitative frames the story and it does so by explaining, from beginning to end what happened. The quantitative supports the structure of the meaning of the story insofar as what result was produced. Okay. But some stories are just what they are. One goes back many, many years. It was the story, and it came upon, it was accidental. Somebody intuited that going to a grocery store to pick up um, diapers on a Monday could enhance sales of beer at the same time. And they came to that conclusion because it turns out that, Monday Night Football was happening. Somebody was told, can you please go to the store? We're out of diapers. And whoever the partner was to that crime on either side of it had to go to the store and do that. And then they said, well, geez, you know what? I'm going to watch the ball game tonight. We're out of beer. And so someone said, well, why don't we put beer next to diapers? And as it turns out, they sold more of one as a result of the other. Now that was just an intuitive. That was somebody who made an observation. But it turns out that the data proved that there was something in that. And so what we've come to understand, and this is particularly true now with the utilization of artificial intelligence and machine learning, we don't necessarily have to strike that kind of pay dirt just once on an occasion. It's possible now to ask questions that might seem a little off center, but might produce an extraordinary result. And this is where technology is playing a role. We have data from multiple streams. We have technology that can process it at near the speed of thought and make it possible for manufacturers and retailers to both be alerted by and not just react, but be proactive in respect to that need state. And you can use your own examples. I mean, if we have a weather condition, if we have a power outage, if we have a celebration in that town that's spontaneous, manufacturers and retailers both can react to that in ways today that they wouldn't have been able to after the fact and do justice to serving their purpose. This is what I think, again, the industry is now moving in the direction of. It's not how much I can make and how much I can make by doing that, make in terms of profit, but am I serving the need states of the end user, i.e., the household, the family, the consumer?
And that's perfect, actually. That was a great answer for that. We'll get into more hands-on now, okay? You've worked on optimizing core processes and brand positioning through analytics. So can you give us an example of a project where you have seen data transform a business, especially in
Mm,
retail?
mm. I'm going to turn the page back a little bit to an era where I was working for a while in frequent shopper programming, loyalty marketing, if you want to call it that. We were doing at that age for grocery stores what airlines were doing were frequent flyers. And I'm going all the way back to the mid 90s, by the way, right? So at that time, we were performing our analysis, decile analysis, and we were essentially using three measures: recency, frequency, and monetary value. When was the last time you came to my store? How often do you come to my store? And how much do you spend when you're in my store on an average? And then we could extrapolate lifetime value from that. And these were the guiding, these were the guiding lights, if you will, of loyalty marketing. Now, of course, some shoppers got some benefit, but not nearly as much as they expected in opting into the loyalty program. Now, in a modern time, when I go to most of the stores that I go to, if I'm a member, I can literally find out, I'm told, in fact, what it is I've just saved as a result of being a loyal member of that store. Now, so here's a great story. One particular store that I was working with, and this is a global retail outfit, a large international firm, was wasn't retaining their customers at a level that they were happy with. In fact, they weren't even acquiring as many customers as they hoped to. And they were trying to figure out how their frequent shopper data could inform a better result. And what we said was, well, what you're doing right now is about right if all you're trying to do is figure out who your best customers are. But it may be that that's just a fact of the data that's leaving out something that's present in the background, which is to say your best customers are being served from you, so they keep coming back. But the ones that are not coming back may not being served as well and therefore are attriting. Well, why is that? Well, because maybe you've got a single person living in that household and their basket size may not be as large as 2.3 kids and a dog and the presence of, parents and so forth, right? A bigger household, bigger yield. However, that one person might actually be more profitable. But maybe the basket's only $100, but maybe what's in the basket is a steak, an expensive bottle of wine. And that person is more of an impulse purchase buyer because they have perhaps a little bit more discretion in their spend. So maybe I need to figure out not just what the total yield of that household is, but what the total opportunity index is, volume and profitability both. It was the result of that analysis that we did three things at the same time. We were attriting fewer, we were increasing enrollment, and we were getting higher value across a wider span of shoppers across the decile analysis, right? And so this was a bit of a breakthrough moment. I mean, it not only allowed the retailer to appreciate the degree which certain segments were underserved, but by sharing some of this information with their manufacturer partners, those manufacturers could assist the retailer in creating programs, trade promotion programs, discount programs, display programs, and so forth that help the retailer serve that purpose. It was a win-win-win. Manufacturers, retailers, shoppers.
You bring an interesting point here, and this is somewhat we have discussed a couple of times earlier as well, right? So, retailers, one of the problems I keep hearing is there is a lot of data overwhelming. So, what do you feel, right? I mean, there are two parts to this problem, right? One is why is that? Like, why is there too much data badgering that happens? And the second is, what do you feel retailers should do to avoid this?
Well, you're not going to avoid it. We have I use your own metaphor. We're having an avalanche of data. There's more data now than there's ever been. I mean, we go back to syndicated research, right? So when scanners came out, by the way, and many may not know the story of why the scanner was invented. It was invented for two reasons, and then the third option came out. The reasons were to deal with the implications of shrink and to speed the process of the checkout. It was an afterthought that all of the data that was being captured was possible to make some sense of that. So now we had to develop technology to deal with all of the data. And this has been the case since the beginning of our journey to data acquisition. There's no problem with the fact that we have data. The problem is, what are we doing with it? Can we do anything with it? And how do we process it more quickly that it can serve, not just its initial purpose as we conceived it, but other purposes that weren't imaginable. Again, machine learning is playing a huge role in this. Artificial intelligence is going to play an outsized role in this. And the micro technology that's being developed, we're playing with Moore's law here, of course, right? But things are accelerating at such a pace that I dare say within the next, not 10 years, not even 5 years, within the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see an astonishing array of technologies and processes coming to bear to reinvent retailing and supply, manufacturing, that is, the two together, in ways that we couldn't barely see. This has already begun to happen. Companies that looked at direct to home, direct to consumer as an outlet to expand the franchise are going to come to realize that it's a channel and that consumers want to be served sometimes in the store, sometimes at home, sometimes on the way home from work, buy online, pick up in store. If you're living in a condominium complex or apartment building, you have lockers and so forth. So we are going to have to understand consumer behavior at a far more intimate level. And the only way we're going to do that is by getting consumers to opt in. Now, again, this increases the torrent of data. I guess the answer to the question isn't to think that you're going to solve every riddle overnight. What you need to do is pick and choose for opportunities that can yield the highest positive result in the near time and then build off of that. I'll give you an example. We used to think of supply chain intelligence as isolated. We used to think of a modern customer experience as isolated. But what if I can't fulfill a promise that I've made to my customer in my customer relationship management program, and I don't understand that the reason of that is I've inspired them to buy, but I don't have enough days of supply? Well, the only way you're going to figure that out is if you can get a flow of data that connects the dots between the promise I've made and my ability to fulfill. How much do I have on hand and how much is required? This is particularly true in FMCG and, by example, DSD, bread, for instance. It's quickly as we can get it on the shelf, it's either gone out of code or there's not enough of it in any case. How do we figure that out? We figure that out by not just packing the truck that backs up to the store with anything that happens to come off the line, but filling the truck with the products that are the right products for the right time under the right conditions in this store versus that store as that driver makes their rounds in the course of a given day or day part. Make sense?
Totally makes sense actually. So we touched upon personalization a bit actually, right, in our earlier discussions. So when it comes to retail, personalization and customer experience have become the key, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
believe with the advent of technologies these days, it's more and more critical. So how do you see data analytics make these retailers provide much more personalized
Hmm.
offers, personalized
Hmm.
experience?
Yeah, great question. Let's go to something that has some real impact actually on well-being. Um, Most grocery stores now have pharmacies. Many, big boxes also have pharmacies, and a lot of pharmacies, of course, have for quite some time now being, selling, cosmetics and groceries, right? At the same time, we're dealing with shoppers who, while in their store, may want more information as pertains to well-being, and so those pharmacies are actually turning into small clinics in order to optimize health and well-being. So it's not just about, I don't feel so well, I'll go see my doctor, or I'm coming for my annual checkup. Well, you could be in a major retailer, whether it's a grocery store or a pharmacy or a mass merchant, and there could be somebody on staff that could do systolics, and they're doing this now, providing vaccinations and so forth. Now, and this is tricky because issues of privacy and HIPAA are involved, but what if I could dovetail my understanding of that consumer, that household, as they shop the store in total, the foods that they're buying, and the life stage and lifestyle they happen to be in by consequence, or vice versa, with their trip to the pharmacy? What if the prescription that's being filled needs to be understood with respect to any OTC that either is being purchased or being contemplated, and or that shopper needs to be informed about the interaction between the prescription and the OTC product, right? So there are ways, and again, we have to deal with the implications of privacy here, but there are ways to mingle the data in such a way as to understand that need state in order for the store to provide a level of service that, again, is more about, nutrition and the quality of life, as opposed to just selling more of whatever it is they buy. I think this is a great example of the potential opportunity that comes at a very important time, especially as the population ages. As Gen Xers move up, and as the other generations move through their lifespans, that we are going to, all of us need to be provided with this information to make better informed decisions about lifestyles, desires, life stages, and so forth. The same application could be used in almost any other category, whether it's in, I'm shopping for electronics, or I'm shopping for apparel and footwear and so forth. Understanding the consumer at the point of decision making, informing them, actually deciding to have a conversation with them before trying to sell them. This is the route to a more authentic relationship. And it's governed by understanding how to be better as a service provider, but also having the data that informs our ability to serve more capably.
Yeah, yeah. And on the flip side, right? I mean, you have the other side of the spectrum where these businesses are dealing with challenges of implementing these strategies, right? And how do you
Yes.
think, what is the reason you think, and how do you think these businesses can overcome these?
Yeah. So you're like any major inter-organizational transformation, this is no different. What do we want to accomplish? And that starts with, what is our purpose? All right. And then working backwards, we say, what do we want to accomplish? Are we trying to increase sales velocity? Are we trying to increase profitability? Are we trying to increase service capability? So identifying what problem and or the intersection of those problems is first. The second is to deal with the implications of the silo within any, and that is by plural, silos within any organizations. Then there's nothing about this that is unusual. We operate within our departments by virtue of our expertise, but we're going to have to learn, if not to be an expert in someone else's area, but to better understand what it is they do that informs how I might do what I do better. And so what that means is transparency across the organization. What that means is the facilitation of understanding, knowledge, and we're going to use the word data between and among constituents within large, complex structures. And this is something that wasn't as easily possible, 10, 15 years ago, but is increasingly not just possible, but, a mandate. How do I create the technology that spans the organization, that gives everybody ready access, that I can, understand the implications of what someone's doing in another office or another department, or even around the corner from my own desk, that what they're doing impacts what I'm about to do, or what I'm about to do is going to have implications for what they do every day. Supply chain management, trade promotion management, category management, these all have to connect with each other, and data and technology make that possible in a way that the enterprise can not just survive, but thrive in a more digital age.
So moving on to my next question, right? We hear a lot about AI and machine learning and analytics. What is your opinion on these technologies making an impact in the industry and the overall decision-making process?
Yeah, these technologies are game changers. Make no mistake. In the same way that the digital device you have at your side right now, whatever that might be from whatever company you bought it, changed everything. In the same way that the internet changed everything. In the same way that globalization, for better or worse, sometimes one or the other, has changed everything. The macroeconomics of the world, that's changed everything. Again, going back to Taleb and the notion of the black swan, we sometimes don't recognize in the moment the degree to which the thing that just happened has changed everything. I do believe that artificial intelligence is, without a doubt, probably the single biggest change that will take place in the world, in humanity, in maybe hundreds of years. That's a little bit of a stretch, all right? But it's very clear that this isn't just some sort of trend that we're going to just get used to. This is going to change how we understand information in real time. I can literally go into ChatGPT and ask just about any question I want and get a reasonably intelligent answer. And it's only going to get smarter with time as the database fills up and the understanding of the questioner and the interaction between, in this case, ChatGPT or whatever other technology you're using and the person using it. That's a learning experience. And the amount of data that's going to inform that, and our ability to understand how this tool can be used for personal, professional, and other reasons is going to astonish us. I'm quite excited about it, among other reasons. And you used the word, democratization of data earlier, and we talked about small shops versus the larger shops, large monolithic organizations who stood, astride the world because of their wealth and their assets under management. Those may not be nearly sufficient enough to guarantee their position. Smaller companies, and this began some years ago now, you could say 5, 10 years anyway. Some people called them interlopers, other called them disruptors, call them what you will. Small companies who latched onto an idea and literally changed how products were manufactured, how products were distributed, and how consumers were served, upended decades of business models that people thought were safe. And I think that, again, artificial intelligence, machine learning, artificial reality, all of these technologies are now commingling to reset the stage for a different period where products and services will be delivered with greater acuity, more information to serve their purpose on a sharper edge, and that shoppers will certainly benefit. We will certainly benefit. I'd like to think that society will benefit likewise.
That's an interesting point you make about large organizations, and I believe lately large organizations have been tackling this disruptor problem by doing spinouts. They spin out a smaller company with a
Hmm.
specified set of people to give them a free hand to disrupt. Coming back to the part where you talked about data democratization and the current AI wave, right? And we had the ex-CTO of VMware come on the podcast and talk about what one of the major differences that AI has made is it has made tools accessible to everyone. Will this advantage be a major advantage when it comes to small businesses trying to get the extreme juice out of the data they have?
I think it certainly has that potential. It makes possible advantages to companies that wouldn't have had anything near the resources of a large, multi-generational, multi-regional company that's got tens of thousands of people working at it and millions of loyal customers. I mean, it makes it possible for smaller organizations to harness their inherent creative capabilities and perhaps create companies and businesses that when they came about by degrees of chance and timing and a little bit of luck and call it moxie. There are a lot of things that make possible the stories of small companies that become large companies, right? We know plenty of those stories, right? I think you're going to see more of those as potential and less the long end of the tail. I mean, I think that there are going to be opportunities, and those small companies don't necessarily have to become large monolithic corporations. They might, but it might be enough just that they do what they do, not just really well, but exceptionally well, and that their performance, their understanding of their performance, the metrics of performance, including the pass through of profits and the margins of error and the risk and the analysis required to ensure that they don't go over the edge, that there are things that are going to be possible for smaller companies that aren't as big, aren't as well staffed, don't have the resources, monetary or otherwise, that I think these advanced technologies are going to make possible for them. I'm quite excited about that. I actually come from a family of entrepreneurs, but I went into corporate, as part of my career. But my family lineage is with a small company that was quite successful, and I'm excited about the potential opportunity for these small firms and for the communities and the regions all over the world that are going to benefit.
That's certainly one positive thing AI has brought for sure. I totally agree with that. So moving on to the next aspect, right? You have been instrumental in helping businesses develop strategic plans that are backed by data. So can you walk us through how you approach strategic planning when you interact with clients or when you approach to clients?
Yeah, this is pro forma. I mean, creating a GTM plan, go to market plan, usually breaks down on several axes, if you will. I think first and foremost, and I go back. I like Simon Sinek is a great example of somebody I think got it right. The simple formula: why, what, how. which is the reverse of how most corporations operated. So why am I here and why should that make a difference? Why now? What product or service that I have that's specialized and distinct from its nearest neighbor, if you will? And how can I serve you, which of course is serving my purpose simultaneously? A good go-to-market program starts with the outside in, not the inside out. And then it starts to break down, what is the total addressable market that I'm here to serve? What's the target list of customers, whatever that might be, highly privileged, middle of the road, age group, demographic, psychographic, and so forth. What's the intermix of all of those that I might actually increase my throughput by understanding different lifestyles and life stages, regardless of income, regardless of age, regardless of region. So you're going to break that down. From there, we have to understand if I make a thing or sell a thing, and how do I do that through service? What is my unique value proposition, if you will? Okay, the interaction, if you will, for the purposes of execution. Somebody does manufacturing or distribution. Somebody does merchandising or selling. Somebody collects the money and counts it. Somebody does the marketing and so forth. So all of these entities within large complex or smaller complex organizations have to understand their role in the organization, their linkage between and among each other. And then finally, I mean, if you want to look at the last, it's how do we perform both individually and collectively, and how do we measure that performance? And by the way, that's a time series. Sometimes that measurement is by the hour or by the minute. And sometimes it's by the week or by the month or by the year. It depends, right? In FMCG, you have roughly 50 weeks a year to get it right. If you're buying an automobile, you have, once in 5 years to get it right, unless you're leasing to somebody. And then it's once every 3 years to get it right. So depending on the category, depending on the area in which you serve, you're going to have just so many opportunities to impress upon those you seek to serve what it is you're here to offer them, why you're special, and why you can do for them something that others might not be able to do, and why you value them, and how you're going to let them know that they're valued every single day. This is the kernel of what business should be in the business of. Data makes that possible. The technology that's available today is going to accelerate data utilization. So all of these things are part of a learning curve, if you will, a flywheel that makes it possible to move from one evolutionary cycle to the next. And if you're really, really smart, you're jumping a cycle and beating everybody to the game. That's the envied position if you manage to pull it off.
You just summed up an entire 1 year management course in a couple of minutes.
Well, I never got around to getting my MBA, but I've spent a lot of time with people who have, and that's also one of the great fortunes of a career over the time that I've had is to work with people like yourself, who have been learning from among the best and the brightest, that we can share with each other our journey and learn likewise.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely true. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you, Michael. Thanks a lot for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a very rich and exciting discussion. Your questions have actually inspired me. So I thank you for the invitation today, and I look forward to the opportunity to meet with you again at your earliest.